After that, the game went back to the board stream. So all I could do to not burst out screaming, and my hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the controller. I knew the game was going to test me if I kept playing, but I had no idea it would go so far. That it was even capable of doing what I just did. I feel my brain going haywire as I asked myself, did the game just read my mind? It didn't seem possible. But what other explanation was there? It was then that I could no longer deny what now seemed obvious. This game is alive. And not only that, it can establish some kind of mental connection with the player. And yet, I couldn't convince myself to stop playing. I don't know if it was the game messing with my mind or just my stubborn curiosity, but even with the previous revelation, I really wanted to see this thing through to the end. Even more than I did before I beat Dementia. Terrifying as it might be, even dangerous, I knew that if I quit playing, I would never be able to stop thinking about it. If I tried to restart the game, it might go back to being normal again. How many people get to witness something like this firsthand, let alone be able to take screenshots of the whole thing? Screwed up as it was, this was the experience of a lifetime. But even so, I couldn't take my chances with my health. I had the TV remote right next to me, ready to turn the TV off just in case I felt I was in actual danger. If that didn't work, I'd pull the plug out of the wall, or just run out of the room. Surely that'd be enough. Whatever powers the game has, it seemed to be confused to what it can show on the TV and whatever its mental connection could do. The latter was what worried me. I still didn't know what I was dealing with, so I wasn't about to underestimate it. I took a breath to calm my nerves. And I was back to the game. And speaking of TVs, there was a TV screen icon right below the white forest I just left. Because the first animation was so bizarre, I figured I'd try to see what happens. Although I expected the same animation, I actually got a totally different one. Weird. The music for this one was the Neptune board music. Fitting, I suppose, since it was a Fishman and all. Can't help but wonder what the point was to these things. There was one more TV screen icon, so I figured it must have been a unique animation of its own. I was going to make sure to see what it was before I left Entropy. Then it was time for a new level. The gold brick icon was the closest thing, so I went to doubt and I started in a gold labyrinth level. My health and power were refilled. Not sure how or why, but I was glad not to be heading into the unknown nearly dead. I also noticed that my Mothra sprite had shrunk down to half its original size. The music was a slow, ominous drum beat, with female vocals kicking in about a minute into it. Quite haunting. The gold labyrinth itself was an anomaly. Not sure how this level would have played if I was using Godzilla and Grace, because flying seemed necessary just to get around the place. Another thing that caught my attention was you go left, your monster actually turns and faces left. That sounds stupidly obvious, but in the original game you were only supposed to move to the right, so when you tried to move left your monster ended up walking or flying backwards. This level was apparently gigantic in size because every time I thought I reached an end to it, I thought I was going to end up back where I started, I encountered something totally new. Things like lava blockades, new enemies, and statue faces. I found one statue face at a dead end with a wide, open-eyed stare. The night Melissa died, she had an expression on her face that looked exactly like this the whole time. Even when she got hit by the truck, she still had that same expression. Can't help but feel like something really is staring at me from behind the screen when I took this. I really didn't want to be reminded of that night anymore, so I left the statue almost as soon as I found it. I needed to find the exit anyway. which proved to be no simple task. It felt like this level stretched on forever in all directions. I must have wandered around the level for at least 15 minutes before I finally saw something. It was a creature that wasn't gold, seemingly the only one of its kind on the level, lacking any kind of hoverability like the other creatures. It just walked back and forth on the platform. But it wasn't long after I found it that a flying machine swooped down and grabbed it, and then flew off with it. The machine apparently had not seen me, so I decided to follow it to see where it was taking the creature. The machine stopped in a room with a large cauldron-like object in the center. The machine hovered over to the cauldron and dropped the creature into it. The creature emerged from a hole in the cauldron's side, now adorned in the same gold color as everything else. The machine flew off. I'm not really sure what to make of all this, but I'm glad I came upon it because I found the exit soon after. When I got back to the board, I realized that the bosses hadn't moved at all. A bit odd, but it didn't bother me. It made playing my route through Entropy easier. There were still 2 new icons to explore, the Indigo Cliffs and a black version of the Labyrinth. Since there were only 3 black labyrinth icons, which were surrounded by bosses, I played the Indigo Cliffs first. It was a lot like the blue and green mountains. The level graphics had a similar shredded look to it. There was also a recolor of the clouds of the moon from the toxic waste dump. The music, if you could call it that, was merely a deep rumbling noise. One of the first things I encountered were these multicolored creatures with big heads emerging from a small cave in the ground. They all made a synchronized shaking sound, and they walked to the right in a group after having emerged from the cave, ignoring me. Having no other way to go, I followed them on their route. More and more emerged from the cave until the group had about 100 creatures. Eventually, the pathway ended in a cliff. I was shocked to see, upon reaching the cliff, all the creatures began jumping off into the abyss. I've seen enemies walk off cliffs before, but I've never seen NPCs commit mass suicide like this. Very unsettling way to start off a level. Continued on flying over various strange animals like the one shown here. Another group of multicolored bobbleheads was jumping up and down only to be snatched up by large birds, which I'm fairly certain are sprite versions of the giant condor from Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster. Defeated some of the condors in battles, but it bothered me that these bobbleheads seemed to be so eager to die. The game itself is alive. Perhaps the creatures in these levels are also alive? Some have very unhappy lives if this behavior is any indication. But what provokes them to do this? Back in my mind, I almost suspect that the glowing moon in the sky is the reason. At the end of the level, I saw yet another group of bobbleheads marching up to a large monster and being devoured. This is starting to disgust me, so acting on impulse, I fired off eye beams at both the monster and the bobbleheads. Destroyed the cave. The monster became angry and ran through the marine bobbleheads to fight me. Although it lacked any ranged attacks, it was relentless. It was no match for me. I was in the home stretch now, up to the bosses. My plan was to go through Batra first, then Megalon. After that, I watched the last TV screen, play the Black Labyrinth before fighting Godzilla, and lastly go through the chase with the Hell Beast. I was curious to see if it would be in a new form again. First things first, time to beat up Batra. As I expected, he started off in his larva form. Music with Varan's battle theme. Whenever the game puts in a new Godzilla kaiju with more than one form, the other form always shows up. For a game that's otherwise inexplicable, it's rather startling in this consistency and accuracy of the new kaiju bosses. The fight started off simple. Larva Batra fought in a similar style as Maguma did, charging back and forth, occasionally firing lightning from its horn. During the fight, I noticed that Mothra's combat abilities had been altered in my favor. The eye beams did twice as much damage as they did originally. Now they were as strong as Godzilla's punches. The poison powder was similarly improved. It also did this nice thing where it would actually hit an enemy when you used it. In the original game, even though Mothra could fly, she was unable to fly over an opponent. You would get knocked back the same way as if you just ran straight into them, which was extremely annoying. But not anymore. I could change direction and fly around, which was a big help because fighting Mago Batra is much like fighting a clone of Mothra, although Batra is distinctly faster and stronger. No longer impeded by its slow-moving larva form, and Mago Batra was a fearsome opponent. Although it lacked the horn lightning, now had a new, more powerful I-beam. Batra could change direction like I could, so in this battle it involved a lot of flipping and flying around. It's pretty damn fun, to be honest. So after defeating Batra, I was excited to see what Megalon would be like. But first I went through an Indigo Cliffs level, and shot through a lot of the creatures for health power-ups. So about Megalon, his music was Gigan's theme. Makes sense since Gigan was his battle partner in Megalon's one, and so far only, film appearance. He was like Magura, but faster and with more weapons. He started out charging with the drills. I liked to fly back and forth around him, which seemed to really annoy him. After a few seconds he'd step back, turn around and start spinning out grenades. Those were a pain because they bounce when they hit the ground. Lastly he'd start spamming his IV. It only went straight forward, so it was easy to duck under it and then shoot him with I-beams. Overall, I describe him as strong, persistent, but dumb. I was now nearing the end of the Entropy. I had just taken down Megalon, and I started up the last TV screen to see what I'd get this time. The result was unpleasant. Music for this gruesome scene was the password theme. Couldn't figure out why this animation was so sinister and violent in comparison to the other two. The whole game seemed to be growing more malevolent. So when to finish Entropy, I began to feel drained. It's hard to describe. Like I suddenly became tired when I wasn't before. Most likely it was just the tension that happened in this game getting to me, but who knows. Last level in Entropy was what I called the Shadow Labyrinth. Scenery was recolored from gold to black. Music was an evil ambience, similar to the unforgiving Cold Loop, but distinctly different. Music was my first sign the level was going to be distressing. I traveled through the maze for about a minute, and I noticed there weren't any creatures hovering around it. It was an odd transition from the gold labyrinth, which was overrun with creatures. This level had nothing at all. But then this might be a good thing. Maybe there wouldn't be any obstacles and I could get through the level with ease. Then the screen went dark, and I immediately snapped out of my daze from a few seconds earlier. Everything had been darkened, so the only thing I could see was the Mothra sprite. Couldn't tell where I was going, and I ended up frantically running into walls. I heard a noise, the sound of a crowd running through a hallway. Along with the running came roars. Loud roaring sounds, which I would describe as something like a rabid dog the size of an elephant screaming with fury. I could tell that whatever was making this noise, there were lots of them. I knew there was something there, but it wasn't until I did some screen cap editing that I got to see what the pursuers looked like. But at the time I couldn't see where they were or where I was going. I was literally running blind, and this mob of beasts eventually caught up with me. All I could think was, no! As I saw my life bar rapidly declining. The monsters had taken me down to half my total health when I was saved. The light came back on, and the attackers disappeared. And so the challenge of this level was revealed. Find the exit before the lights go out, and a pack of monsters maul you to death. I was in panic mode now, moving as fast as I could while trying to find every path I could to find a way out. As I played through the level, the lights went out a total of 3 times. The second time, I would have been dead meat if it had not been for one of those wide-eyed statues. As I stayed close to it, the monsters all seemed to avoid me until the light came back. The statue lured them away somehow. I was safe as long as I stayed near the statue, but at the same time I had to leave to find an exit. Shadow Labyrinth turned out to be much smaller than the Gold Labyrinth, as it only took me 6 minutes to navigate to the end. But before the exit, there was a row of halls leading straight down, with no way out once you entered. You either got to the exit before the monsters reached you, or you died. Thankfully, I made it out. I had one more boss, Godzilla. I started the battle and got something unexpected. Not only did my life shoot back up to 100% again, seems to do that randomly, but instead of a replacement boss, I was fighting Godzilla. But any Godzilla fan worth their salt can figure this out. Godzilla started off like fighting a clone Godzilla, but his disguise burned away after only 3 life bars. Usually a transformation only occurred at the halfway point. This point was like fighting Godzilla in the normal game. It felt kinda nice to fight one of the original game enemies for a change. Although it wasn't exactly like normal, he also had a rainbow beam and finger missiles. This prevented me from doing the old trick of backing him into the corner and hitting him with eye beams in a spot where he couldn't hit me, but that was always a cheap trick anyway. But after getting him down to half his health, something weird started to happen. The sprites started to glitch in much the same way as Godzilla had back in the first world. After a few seconds, the glitches began to form a new shape. Thus, the game had created not Godzilla, and I discovered this visual glitch was somehow related to the game recreating things. The human face on this one gives it a very uncanny look. It was one of the stronger replacement monsters, and had the most firepower. Pictured here is its mouth beam, which I got caught in the middle of. Even though it was a bit stronger, it also was slower than its original counterpart and couldn't jump around as much. I won the fight by constantly staying out of the line of fire, bombarding the machine with poison power as I flew over it. One last thing to do. The hell beast chased. Oh boy. Might as well get this over with, I thought. The Entropy end chase ended up being exactly what I was afraid it would be. A labyrinth level. All the other chases, although difficult, were extremely straightforward. You just had to run right to the end and not get touched. But this took all the simplicity out of it. There was no telling how big this labyrinth would be, where the exit was. Now, not only did I have to constantly backtrack my way out, I also had to avoid getting one hit killed by the red monster. For those first 30 seconds it didn't show up, but I knew it would, and as I started picking up the pace, I heard a loud flapping noise. And there it was in a flying form. It flew with bat-like wings and as fast as relentless as ever. For reasons already stated, this was probably the most nerve-wracking of all the end chases, and as such I had to keep my focus on the game and not taking screen caps. However, I did take one of the red monster doing something I found very interesting. I managed to lose it by going through a different path than apparently expected, and it was blocked from attacking me by one of the organic walls of the red labyrinth, or so I thought. It tried crawling through the wall for a second before opening up its mouth and tearing the wall apart with intestine jaws. But those brief milliseconds that the monster held back might have been the key to me finding the exit. The path to the exit was long and complex, but from what I remember I went up and then back towards the left. I'm still not sure why I chose that particular way. It was just a lucky hunch, I suppose. I was sweating profusely, but my luck had saved me yet again. I hoped it wouldn't run out before I finished the game. Only 2 more worlds to go. Now it was the penultimate world, called